My question about this is that you have presenting some different cases of new products, uh, interesting ideas. So my question is, did you use in that cases, did you use these tools that you're talking here in your diamond? And the other question is about how was the dimension of the team that did that product development?
Okay, thank you. Great questions. So some of the historical items I presented towards the start of this presentation were associated with teams of students or graduates from the Innovation Design Engineering programme at the Royal College of Art and Imperial, or Global Innovation Design, the same universities. And those teams regularly use creativity tools to supplement their own natural or innate creativity. It's not uncommon for teams to develop sometimes, well, our common practice is to develop several hundred ideas before we go into convergence.
Okay.
And we find that necessary in order to ensure the quality of the idea and differentiation from common practice. That number may actually be quite shocking to some of the audience here, especially say in engineering, in some of the engineering domains, the notion of having 600 distinct ideas before you go into selection. How do you cope? But that's just something associated with our practice. In terms of jumping to your big question, the creativity diamond, it's new. How well tested is it? It is a new framework. We have, there are about between 10 and 20 groups around the world exploring its use in practice. Has it been validated yet as a framework? No, but many of the tools it uses have been validated. So we are building upon the shoulders of giants in the case of great tools like Scamper, the contradiction matrix from Triz, the use of metaphor analogy, which for a long time has been the use of analogy recognized as one of the preeminent challenging but really effective approaches in creativity. So that's a partial answer to your question. You're welcome to respond on that.
Okay, we have already here two questions, but before I ask you these two questions, let me just ask you another question. In my daily life in the Faculty of Engineering, I teach one course to mechanical engineering students, and I also teach courses to design product and industrial design students. And I have one course that I join both of them. And what happens is that when we have an idea to develop a new product, industrial and product design students are more creative than engineers. So engineers need more definitions or a problem with more data in order to start to develop the development. On the other side, the other design students at the beginning, they generate automatically thousands or hundreds of ideas, different ideas. Do you have any experience relatively to this in terms of the background of the students facing these creativity tools that you talk here?
Okay, so there have been many studies looking at industrial designers and how they think versus engineers. And you could look at the work of John Giro over the years if you want to look up some of the big studies or some of the significant studies in this area. So one of my delights, and I take great pleasure in this, is encouraging thinkers, and all of us are thinkers, to explore new territory. So my experience is that anybody, whether they are a mechanical engineer, civil engineer, or chemical engineer, can be encouraged to explore more diverse ideas with greater fluency, if you wish. And the designer who may not have a technical background can be encouraged to consider technical aspects without having to learn mathematics, for example, but by let's use the IDEO approaches of feasibility, desirability, and viability. Those wonderful provocations. Before you set upon an idea and decide to go for it, do that little test. Is it feasible? Is it viable? Is it desirable? So those are great and powerful for the designer, because it forces them, if they've not got a technical background, but they're doing something that is technologically related, is it feasible? They've got to find that out, perhaps by engaging other people and experts. I work across many domains. So for me, creativity spans all 71 domains in my taxonomy of different domains, from social work to law to politics to engineering to chemistry. Creativity is in every one of these subjects. But I often joke, but maybe I'm right, that mathematics is the most creative of all topics. Why do I say this? I say this because when you get beyond second year mathematics in the university, all of a sudden you get into this wonderful world of adventure, of exploration and experimentation, using the tools of mathematics, where people are highly inventive, highly exploratory. And it is really complex, wonderful topic area, well beyond what practicing engineers get engaged with. And so when you listen to mathematicians exploring the boundaries of their topic, to me, they are being highly creative. And I just say this as a bit of inspiration for us all, that whatever domain we come from, all of us can be creative. Look at those amazing bridges throughout Portugal and Spain, for example, which have delighted the world over the last 30 or 40 years. Fantastic statements of architecture. And the aesthetics, the engineering, the structural considerations, very impressive. And delightful outcomes, certainly invoking creativity.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going now to read some of the questions that we have here for you. And Gilberto Bernardes asked the following: in all our examples and creativity framework, you stress the importance of process as fundamental to innovation, creation, and research. In this context, can you comment on the evaluation strategies within engineering, which typically focus mostly on the outcomes and outcomes only, rather than the process across scientific dissemination? Example, papers.
All right. Great question. I think I want to take this, give an academic answer, so from academic research, but also a practice answer. So process in industry is important. Companies need to get a lot done, and they need to deliver at the end something that generates the finance in order to pay for everything. So they need success, essentially. And many industries implement a process which they follow with the aspirational hope that it will deliver financial value. And that's why so many people will follow standard project management approaches, because they're tried and tested, and people have reasonable confidence in the ability of that process to deliver. Academia, we value, in academia, so I enjoy my role as a professor. I love teaching. I enjoy supervision of student work. I also enjoy research. And research for me is about exploring unknowns that nobody else knows. Sometimes I will engage in a topic because I've seen another researcher publish a paper and I go, oh, how did they do that? That looks interesting. But to me, that's not research. That's me discovering what they already know. That's me rediscovering or learning. Yeah, let's call it that. It's learning rather than research. Research for me is exploring something that nobody else in the world knows. And I find those topics fascinating, interesting, and enticing, let's put it that way. So, of course, if you're going to engage in big unknowns, or just whatever, little or big unknowns, then you may well need to follow some kind of process, whether it could be an inductive approach or a deductive approach. It could be qualitative, it could be quantitative. There are many ways of attempting to establish knowledge. And I think it's worthwhile, I think it's interesting. And of course, as an academic, we commonly communicate that knowledge through our publications. When you kindly talked about my publications, you said I got 200 publications. Well, again, I will sometimes comment, I've done quite a lot of publications. I think that a few of them are quite good. What's that saying about the rest? So, I've commonly joked, oh, 2 of my 200 publications are good, but I don't know which 2. So, joking aside, process, or following a process, whether it's a deductive process or an inductive process, and deductive thinking and inductive thinking are part of the creativity diamond, really to remind us of a variety of thinking approaches, which can be highly valuable. And in my research, I do use qualitative and quantitative approaches, depending upon what I'm looking at. So to me, that is using established process in order to attempt to establish knowledge in somewhere that previously we did not know that. So a long answer. I suspect it'd be good to have a conversation about that one.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Next question is from Manuel Firmino, and he says, he divides this in 2 parts. The first part says that the first step in several approaches of creativity is focusing, having a closer look over the situation. Then, in a second moment, we need some detachment to let the brain have time to find a creative solution. Do you think that the transition of these 2 different cognitive perspectives can help us to the progression between divergent and convergent thinking?
Okay.
And second part of the question is that you mentioned the contributes of neuroscience and psychology in this field. Can you share some knowledge about the role of the emotions on the creativity process?
Oh, I'll do the last one first. Emotions, brilliant. So many years ago, I was introduced to Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, that taxonomy of 40 emotions, which is widely shared within design schools. So most students know about this. And I love that list of 40 emotions. To me, an emotion is valuable. Each of them serves a very useful purpose. In the English language, emotion gives you a clue as to what it means. It's to cause emotion or to cause an action. So I regard all of the emotions as important. And one of the chunks of work that we have done over the years, and I'm sure, well, I'm very much aware that other teams have done this, is in decision making. When you have so many ideas, one of our challenges in creativity is if you've got a vast quantity of ideas, how do you decide which ones to explore? Yes, you could look at each one of the 600 you've got and do a feasibility, viability, desirability test. But if you do that one by one, that could easily take you weeks or months or years. We've developed decision-making software, and traditionally decision-making software has been rationale-based. But as any observer of humanity will tell you, decisions are not rationale and logic-based only, they are sort of gut based as well, if you wish. And so about 20 years ago, we started coding up the emotions, and so that decisions could be taken angrily or with frustration or with love or with hate. So we just started coding up each of the emotions. In the first round of work, I think we did about 17 of them, so it wasn't comprehensive. But I find emotions incredibly useful in many areas of work. It's not quite the question you asked, but I'm just saying that in terms of decision making, emotions have their role to play, and we've implemented that in software for decision making software. And we find that the decisions made in combination between rationale and emotion are more robust than the decisions taken by rationale only. So it's actually more successful if you go for this mix of rationale and gut when it comes to coding approaches. So that's one thing. Now, the first part of your question was about cognition and forms of thinking. Let's just leave it in that broad way. So ways of thinking and the way that the mind works, and sort of moving between one phase of mental cognition and another. One of our team, Yuan Yin, has been looking at this recently and looking at, do things happen sequentially, or are there forms of overlap? And what is the quality outcome between the difference of these? And she's begun publishing her work, so that's gradually emerging. And so I think that we are all different, and there is delight in that. Can we force ourselves to think differently and behave differently? Well, there will be elements where we can train. If we didn't believe in training, then why would educators carry on? So there are elements that you can train people, and of course, with notions of neuroplasticity, for example, then people who accept neuroplasticity would follow the notion that the brain can change with time, and therefore new approaches to thinking can develop within an individual. So there are those notions. I am less careful in my own work and practice. I will jump around. So one of the things that I find in my personal practice and in those who have to suffer my engagement, that sometimes work is necessity driven, sometimes work is opportunity driven. So in some traditional approaches, people want to explore what is the need And that's great. It's important to understand the need. And so in engineering, we often have extensive effort applied to requirements capture. And that can dictate the way you subsequently think. Engineers and other people are amazingly inventive. And sometimes they come up with something and they go, well, I know I got an invention, but I got no idea what it's good for. And so you might say that's an opportunity. And I find that with opportunities, people think differently. So I think the long answer to your question is it probably depends what you're facing. So the context is going to be important. But we are beginning to understand how different individuals think in terms of mixing their cognitive style. And is it sequential? Is it overlap? And what is the quality of outcome? So the work of Yuan Yin is specifically looking at that. So contact me and I'll put you in touch or alert you to some of her papers. Not everybody's going to enjoy looking at that kind of work because you may know your own cognitive style and it may say, well, it's not as effective as somebody else using a whose capabilities or natural function is a different pattern of cognitive style. Well, I'm not so worried about comparisons. Once you understand yourself, then you can begin to optimize and use tools and approaches which are good for you as an individual. So taking on board individual differences. If you understand the people in your team, then you can tune approaches for the individuals within that team. Remembering, of course, that if you impose a single way of thinking on a big team, it's a route to a disaster because you have failed to consider individual differences. So the notions of making everybody use Scamper is a nonsense.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have here a good question. What is the connection of your model of the creativity diamond and the double diamond model of the British Council?
Well, the double diamond built on work from the 1950s. So Osborne and Parnes came up with 6 diamonds in their creative problem-solving process. So the double diamond is great because it's a wonderful graphic guiding us through various phases common to design. And we use double diamond regularly in education, and I commend it to you. So the diamond is a common feature, and the only reason I used the diamond was because it captured the notion of divergence and convergence. But in the double diamond from the Design Council, or indeed in the 6 diamonds of creative problem solving, so Osborne in the 1950s in his original book, Applied Imagination, stated the importance of divergence and convergence. So a diamond comes out of that, hence the work of Parnes and Osborne, or Treffinger and Isaacson, if you want to look up the work, which precedes by some decades the double diamond. But in each of those phases of the double diamond, they have divergence and convergence through definition, through development, and the other processes of the double diamond.
Okay. And the last question that I have here is from Henrique Lopes Cardoso. He thank you for the great talk. And as a question, what do you think the role of creative artificial intelligence tools such as language model, example the ChatGPT, and the image generations, example Dale, might be in some of the axes of your framework?
Okay. So I'm a heavy user of AI, loving it, enjoying it. I've so enjoyed playing around with ChatGPT. It's been a wonderful wonderful development over since 2016, and now widely available. And I also enjoy playing around with DALL-E, and diffusion modeling, of course, has come in as a really powerful approach in image manipulation, if you wish. So I just see these things as new tools, or tools for augmentation. So where do I think it's going? Well, each one of us is creative, but if we employ AI, then we can augment and add to our creativity. So what is the human? I see the human as the human in the loop on creativity, whereby the human can deploy AI tools if they want to. Throughout my design and engineering life, I have been very happy to deploy tools. I use tools to make things. I will use a 3D printer to output a physical form. I will use a word processor to help form a narrative. I will use a computer-aided design package to help capture imagery and form. AI is different, but it is still a tool if you choose to use it alongside your creativity. And so I see the human as the director of creativity if the AI is deployed in that way. So I'm loving it. I would encourage use of these tools and exploration within our work. I know it makes some academic tasks a challenge, and it is different to the, the joke I made some time ago was, well, we coped with the introduction of the calculator, challenging mental arithmetic, and academia coped with that. We will find ways of coping with generative AI in the coming. Well, it's already here. So we have generative AI already, and it's quite challenging to spot the difference between generated images with diffusion modeling versus those without, versus those done by people. So a wonderful development, great fun, something to embrace and explore.
So, Peter Childs, it was a big pleasure to spend this 1 hour and 15, almost 15 minutes with you, talking about this creativity. It was a big pleasure for me to moderate this session. I acknowledge your presence here, and I think that it's time now for the organization to give some final words for this session. So, Manuel Firmino, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. So I'm delighted to thank you in the name of all. Thank you very much, Professor Peter Child, for your fantastic and inspiring talk. And the answer, of course, the interesting answer to all our questions. And of course, Professor Jorge Lino, for your kind moderation of this event. Thank you all for your participation in these 9 creativity talks. And honestly, we look forward to see you very soon in our next talk, already in 23 of this month, already with Christina Lopes. So I wish to see you soon. Have an excellent night to you all, and please stay safe and be creative.